Hello everyone and welcome back for another Design Cuts live session. We're really excited for today's live workshop with the wonderfully talented Nathan Brown. How are you, Nathan?
Hey, I'm good. I'm real good. How are you?
I'm great as ever. I love your backdrop every time we go live. I think it's so awesome.
The
This
Nerd
session,
Museum.
yeah, it's amazing though, right? This session's something slightly different from what you've done before. What are you going to be sharing with the design cutters today?
I'm going to demonstrate how I take a traditional painting and I convert it to a digital painting and finish it out. So it's like a complete hybrid of traditional and digital art.
Incredible. And shout out, we can see there's tons of people here with us today, really active in the chat. So say hi, let us know where are you tuning in from. But thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Jordan as well, shout out Jordan. Jordan is one of our earliest ever members. Like
Cool.
If memory serves, I feel like literally one of our first 50 or something, like 8 years ago. So
wow,
respect, Jordan. But yeah, I'm super excited for this workshop. I'm going to hand over to you, Nathan.
Yeah, cool. All right. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Let's see here.
Amazing. I can see a lot of Nathan fans in the chat as well. Great to see people from all over.
There we go. Okay, can you see this now?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Cool. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Cool. Okay. So I'm going to start out. I'm going to show you guys a photo of the original painting. Now I'm going to show you a couple different things. Now this is a painting that I started. This is a watercolor. It's on cold press watercolor paper. And I started this painting with the intent of finishing it on the iPad in Procreate. So I started traditional with the intent of finishing digital.
I think it's a good sign, Nathan. I couldn't tell at first if it was analog or digital because you've got so good at mirroring analog with your digital brushes.
Nice. That's cool. That's great to hear, actually. So what I did was I'm using this watercolor again. I think this is like maybe a 9x12 painting. I took it out onto the patio in the shade. I lay it down on the ground flat, and I just take my iPhone and snap a picture of it. So there's a setting in your iPhone in the camera settings that where you can turn on, I think it's brackets, and it gives you this, it gives you a grid over the camera screen, and it helps you um, to line it up so that it's a level shot, if that makes sense, so that you're holding over the paper level, so it's not skewed. Um, so then I brought it in and I transferred it to the iPad, and so that's where we are now. If you'll kind of see, show you a couple things that I look for. Um, you can kind of see that the paper is dark here because it's a little bit, the paper's a little wavy from the water. It's not completely flat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll address that stuff in just a little bit. But that might happen, just because if you don't flatten the paper, which I don't do a whole lot of, you might get a little bit of that in the photo. So on this first pass, you also notice that the colors are a little drab, okay? Because I took the shot in the shade and like it's got good contrast, like there's good light and dark in the original photo, but the colors are a little drab. So the first thing I did was a hue saturation adjustment. And that's just taking this original photo and just going to hue saturation and just bumping it way up. Okay, so you can see some of the yellows and the blues starting to come alive a little bit, to be a little bit more brighter, a little bit more saturated.
Makes a big difference. And
it really does.
I think that was like 80% or something.
It was like really high. Like I normally wouldn't push it that high because it starts to look weird. But in this case, it starts to, my colors start to get a little bit brighter. And I have a good base to work from. Okay, so now I'm always looking for value contrast in my paintings. So I've already got some really good darks here, and then I kind of have all these midtones. So with this particular painting, and a lot of times what I'll do with taking traditional art and converting it to digital is start looking for the highlights first, because I've already got good darks, I've got good color, Now I need to punch the highlights up a little bit. So I'm going to use a couple of brush sets. I'm going to use the watercolor set from the Ultimate Brush Toolbox, and I'll probably use a little bit of the Master Watercolor set too. But we'll start with the Ultimate Watercolor set. Okay, so I'm going to choose a brush that doesn't have a real hard edge, so something that's got kind of a soft edge, and I'm just going to go with pure white. Okay.
Nathan, could I ask one question
Please.
before we jump in? So Diane
Yeah,
in the live chat asked a great question.
sure.
Said, why would you want to take a beautiful watercolor and make it digital?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's, for me, it's just a matter of like, I really like the combining the two, because there's things about traditional that I love, and there's things about digital I love. And putting them together like this, like you can do some things on the digital side that you couldn't do on the traditional side, and vice versa. So I like to combine as much as possible. I find it to be fun and interesting, and just a great way to experiment. And I'll show you kind of what I mean here in just a minute.
For
We'll
sure.
kind of start to get into a realm of pushing things that you really might not could do with traditional watercolor.
You know, that really resonates. When I did art at college, I used to love doing mixed media. So
Oh yeah,
even when it was analog, I'd be mixing like cross-hatched pen with
yeah,
paint washes, and layer up some tactile stuff with a palette knife, and bringing together these different styles and different medias led
right.
to some really interesting results. So why not extend that concept,
Yeah,
that
it's
mixed media
right. It's
concept, to digital and analog?
yeah, and it allows for a lot of experimentation, because if you've ever painted a traditional watercolor, you'll know that like you can only take it so far before you start to really kind of mess it up, right? Because
Mhm.
you can't undo what you just did.
Yeah.
So with this though, we can try some things, and then if it doesn't work, we can just back out. But there is
Yeah.
also an aspect that I like. If I were to finish this watercolor on paper, I would have hit the spot where I would have started adding probably some white gouache to try to make some of the highlights really pop. And that's what we're going to do right now. Actually, I'm going to start a new layer, and I'm going to show you some of these. Uh, I'll show you the final that I did, but I want to show you how I did them first. But I took. I'm looking for these highlights, and I took um, a soft edge brush, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and I'm just going to paint in some of these white highlights. So it's just these white feathers on this bird are just going to get more white. So you'll kind of see that like it starts to have this kind of glowing quality, because yes, the paper is white, but this this white is whiter, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
By the way, again, I have to shout your brushes out, Nathan, because I think very few people's brushes would work like this. Normally, if you were drawing on analog, the difference would be stark. You
It
would
might
easily
stand out.
say that's analog, that's digital. The two feel very incongruous. I think again, this is testament to the time and effort you put into your brushes, that the two match together so seamlessly.
Oh, thank you. So kind. I appreciate that. Okay, so I just got some white feathers in, or some white highlights in, and I would throw in probably a wash, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to use one of these grunge clouds, and what I want to do is just kind of uh, make an area where this white paint will disperse a little bit. And let's try this brush and see if it will work. That's probably a little too harsh. Let's try another one. Let's try the sponge wash. There we go. That's a little bit better. See how it's just kind of adding this glow and dispersing the white paint just a little bit. Now I would also add some splatters. And I believe I also added a outline. So I'm going to take a real fine, I'm going to try the detailer, And I'm just going to add this bit of glowing edge or white edge. And it just kind of makes the bird stand out a little bit from the background. Like if I was going to do this on traditional, I would probably use like a white gel pen or something that
Mhm.
just creates a
Is
real
it
fine line.
is this called a rim light?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would
Something
be
like that?
a form of a rim light for sure. But I'm just it's also highlights, you know, because I'm adding some detail to the but on the bird, I would definitely call it a rim light. And I think we could take the same brush and just blur a little bit so it's, the highlight's not so strong. So right away, like you can see, like how much different just that. I mean, what did we spend like 5 minutes and just added that just little bit, and it suddenly makes the bird like feels like it's glowing to me, like it's just got
Mhm.
this. And I think I would also take a large wash brush. Let's see. Uh, there's a brush called large wash. Perfect. Okay.
That'll
So I
do.
think that's the one. And I would just like balance out some of this background so that it's not so dark. So we bring back some of the white of the paper.
God, it looks so easy. You know, that in, analog, I guess, would be either impossible or really takes some time, whereas just a swoosh of the Apple Pencil and you've
Right,
cleaned it all up.
right. Okay, so this is essentially what I did in the final painting, and I just demonstrated over just just a few minutes here. So I'm going to turn this layer off, those two layers, and this is the actual wash that I painted, or the highlights. This is the white wash that I did. This is the splatters, and then this is the white border. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the white
It's
border.
fe it's feeling like a Christmas card now.
We're getting into the realm of Christmas cards. No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. You could do some more. Let's see, you could do some more white splatter, and it might become snow, right? You know, do like maybe we'll stretch it out a little bit.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it starts to become snow. Yeah, look at that. It's snowing. Okay, so now I'm gonna do. So I've got the overall painted look that I like, right? So I'm going to three finger swipe and copy all, and I'm going to three finger swipe again to paste it. And so now on this layer, I basically a flattened layer of everything below. Okay. And I'm going to do a curves adjustment because I really want to make, I do a lot of curves adjust. I'm sorry, that's not a curves adjustment. That's a curves adjustment right there. Okay. So I do a lot of curves adjustment and I do adjustments and I do them a certain way. I add all these points. If you've seen a demonstration before, you've probably seen me do this. Add all these points and I adjust each one of these points. And you can see that like it's only adjusting this certain area. You know, it's only adjusting this certain, you can see what's happening there. So I get to kind of pick and choose what is like that's the really darks right there. You can see in the bird's head how just the head is getting darker and lighter. So you can make all these fine tuning um, adjustments by just moving these little points. You know, that's all the lights there, making it lighter or
Very
darker.
cool.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't realize about these elements of control that you can have within Procreate.
absolutely. There's a lot of. I'll show you. Um, and I got another painting to show you, and I mimicked the clone stamp in Procreate. Like it's not a true clone stamp, but I did it, and I'm normally used to taking something to Photoshop and doing something like that, but I actually found that it was pretty easy to do in Procreate, and that's the case with most everything. Like Photoshop and Procreate for me have kind of become interchangeable. Like you can do most of the thing as far as painting goes. Do most of the things. So here's my curves adjustment. I went lighter with it. And okay, so now on this one, I did a background adjustment, but what I did was I did a freehand selection of just around the bird like this real quick. Okay. And then I copied the bird to a new layer, and I did a adjustment to the background and pushed the saturation of the background because I did a hue saturation adjustment to the background, but without the bird because the bird is on its own layer. So if you can kind of see, if I turn the bird layer on and off, it's real subtle, but the bird doesn't quite have as much saturation as the background. And I did
Got
that.
it.
I did that because I felt like the background needed, because here you can see it's real subtle. I don't know if you can tell what's happening or not, but the background, I felt like it needed a little bit of a color push,
Yeah,
but the bird did not. If that makes sense, like the bird's good, but the background needed a little bit more of a saturation push to match, for everything to match up.
incredible. Deb says in the live chat, "Wow, great curves tip," and also
Yeah, it's
loves the ultimate set of brushes.
oh cool.
Thank you,
Cool.
Deb.
Another thing that's really fun to do at this point in time, because I'm pretty happy with this as it is, because this is the natural colors for this particular bird. It's this real bright blue and yellow, but it's always fun just to take. I'm gonna make a uh, new flattened layer. So we've got a new layer above everything else, and the painting is flat. To do a color balance adjustment is it's really fun to do. To just maybe push the midtones, maybe a little more. Like that's in the blue direction, which shifts the background a little bit more blue. It shifts the branch a little bit more blue. So that's kind of cool. Or you can go red and see that's pretty cool. There's just, I mean, I can do a color balance adjustment and just play with it.
And again, that is something you could never really do with analog.
Exactly. So I think that helps to answer the question of why would you want to take a traditional painting and move it into Procreate? Well, this is a perfect example because it's really fun to see your painting and just to look at all these different options for colors. Maybe you're going to make a set of prints, but you want to make some adjustments like this before you do. Okay, so there's my final painting for this bird. Cool. All right. So now let's take a look at another one. Now this one was done with the intention of taking it digital. So it was it was a painting that I took up to a certain point on paper and then finished it out on the iPad. But this other one is a little bit of a different story. So I did
Mhm.
this painting
Wow, look at that.
with the
Um,
intent. Sure, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, do let us know in the live chat. Are you following along? Okay, so far. Was everything clear in that first
Oh yeah, any
example and that
questions?
demonstration? And yeah, incredible, by the way, Nathan.
Oh, thank you.
Love that bird painting
Thank
as
you so
ever.
much.
I can see a few questions coming in the ask a question box, but perhaps we could do some Q&A at the end if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. So now this one it's sometimes you go to do a painting and you're just doing it purely for experimentation purposes, right? Like you don't intend to show it to the world. You're trying something out. So this particular painting, I did this fox illustration, and I wanted to try and combine watercolor with pastel pencils, just to see what I could do, see how well they would work together. And I believe that they do work together, but I just grabbed a piece of watercolor paper without really thinking. And this particular paper was probably a little bit too rough, had a little bit too much texture for pastel pencils. It just kind of, uh, it probably would have worked better on like a hot press paper or something with a little bit of texture, but more smooth. So the pencil, just, I say all that just to say the pencil didn't look quite right. So given that, I began to just say, okay, well, this experimentation didn't work out. So I have all these brushes. I've got a toothbrush and some other brushes to test out some splatters, right? So I've got some stencil brushes and things that are real bristly that splatter really well. So I just kind of went nuts with the splatters, and I was trying stuff out like, oh, this works really cool. So I've got this fox with splatter all over it, right? So when I was done, I folded it. Whoops. Let's see. I folded it and set it in the trash because I was done. So at some point in time, it fell off. The trash can was full, and it fell off, and it was in the floor. And I came back across it like maybe a week later or whatever, and I thought,
I can't
oh.
believe you throw this in the trash.
Well, I mean, it was just one of those things where it's like, well, I'm done. This is I'll try the pastel pencils again later on a different paper. So, I came back across it. I was like, oh wait, after a week or so's time, I opened it up and I'm like, what's this? And I saw it with like different eyes, right? I was like, oh, this is work that I had put out of my mind and forgotten about, and now I'm seeing it like instead of seeing it as like something I'm working on, I saw it as something that was done. So I saw it, I was like, oh, this might could be something. So I took it out onto the patio and I took a picture of it with my iPhone. And you can see that, like, I mean, it's got the fold down the middle and the paper is all wrinkly and there's weird shadows and all kinds of stuff going on. But the way I fixed that was I took, let's see here, I took this one right here. Okay. I just, this is a photo. I had this one just so you could see how bad it was. Yeah. So this is the photo zoomed out. This is the photo zoomed in. And I fixed that fold line. This is what I was talking about the clone stamp earlier. Like you can
Mhm.
see, I took little selections next to the fold line right here. So I was taking all these little selections. Imagine this is the selection tool. And I'm just taking these and copying them and then moving them over the fold line and then just blurring the edge,
Nice.
right? So it covered up the little fold line. You can see what it looks like after I kind of blurred the edges and did some erasing. So I just kind of mimicked the clone stamp in Procreate.
Mhm. Is this what Bob Ross, I think, used to call a happy little accident when you
Happy
stumbled
accident,
across
I
this
guess.
piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This whole painting is a happy accident. So I was telling the story of this painting before my power went out. This is a traditional. This is a fox painting. It's on watercolor. It's on cold press paper, and it was an experiment because I just wanted to see if I could take watercolor and add pastel pencils. So if I could start a watercolor and then finish it with pastel pencils. But what ended up happening was I was using like a really rough paper, and the pastel pencils didn't really take to the paper very well. So it was kind of like, well, it's kind of a failed experiment. I'll try again later on a smoother surface paper. But what I ended up doing was I was looking at it and I had all of these cool like toothbrushes and metal bristle brushes that I was intending to use to make splatters. So I just started testing those out, and I'm just this whole painting is just kind of covered with splatters and just it's kind of a mess. But that was just part of the experiment, right? I sort of shifted from pastel pencils to just seeing what I could do with cool splatters. So I was done and I folded this painting. You can see it right here. I folded the painting right here and I just set it in the trash because I was done, right? I mean, I didn't intend to do anything with this painting. And the trash can was full. And at some point during, the next few days, it slid off the top of the trash bin. And I picked it up a few days later and unfolded it. And I kind of saw it with new eyes, right? Because I didn't really see it as an experiment anymore. I sort of saw it as just like a finished piece, just as it is. I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. It's cooler than I remembered it being, right? So so I took it out onto the patio and I just shot a picture of it with my iPhone. And you can see that there's like all these, like I never bothered to flatten out the paper, because you can take watercolor paper because it's cotton and you can heat it up and you can kind of iron it out and you can get rid of all these folds. And then of course I had that fold line down the middle. But I just left those and I just took a picture of it. And right off the bat, I knew it's like, okay, well, I've got to get rid of this fold line, right? So let's get rid of, this is like a tighter crop of the painting. And I basically started making all of these selections, right? Just making all of these selections like right next to the fold line, all these little selections. And then I'm copying and pasting those and just scooting them over. And I'll show you what it looks like without. Okay. and just blurring the edges and just basically just hiding that fold line. So I'm really mimicking the, uh, I think it's called the stamp or the clone tool in Photoshop. I'm just mimicking what that tool does by just having a selection next to an area I want to cover up, if that makes sense. So you see what's happening there and see how I'm covering that up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Does it
Okay.
make sense to everyone? But yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully it makes sense to everyone else as well.
All right, so then I flattened that image, so I have a flattened image now. And okay, so I wanted to basically just experiment
Yes, people
with
are saying
colors
yes,
in
it does
this.
make sense. That's good.
Oh, cool, awesome,
We're good.
awesome. Okay, I knew that with this one, I just wanted to experiment with color. I mean, the painting is already like to a point where like I feel like, you know, I don't need to add a lot of like brush strokes. You know, there's pretty good contrast happening. I don't need to like really add a lot to the painting other than just some experimentation with colors and maybe a little bit of value contrast because I kind of want it to have a little bit of a glowing effect, which I like to have with a lot of my digital watercolor. So what I did was I took a new layer or created a new layer and I went into color dodge mode or color dodge blending mode. And when I use color dodge, like that's like full experimentation mode right there because there's really random crazy things happen with color dodge. And I sometimes my color selection in color dodge doesn't really have the intended results. And that's kind of what I was after. So I'm going to take a brush just to show you an example real quick. I'm going to take a brush. I'm going to use one from the Ultimate Watercolor set. And I'm going to use this paper round because it has a soft edge. And I'm going to choose like maybe a pinkish sort of red, I think is what I ended up kind of going with. And you can just kind of see that like you just start to make these color shifts that just kind of happen with color dodge. That's just really kind of because I mean I'm seeing like some purples here in the middle and then it kind of goes down to pink. And I'm just making all of these just shifts in color. And if you try like blue, I'm sure everyone is familiar with color dodge and what that blending mode does. But in fact, I'm going to use a wash. I'm going to go to the washes. The washes are from the Master Watercolor brush set, and I'm just going to drop a couple of. This is just tapping the pencil, and you can see just kind of.
Someone's asking if you're using the Ultimate tool, but you're using both, aren't you? The Master and the Ultimate.
I'm using both. Yeah. So
yeah.
The brushes that I just had was the Ultimate Brush Toolbox. Is this set right here. And then the washes are from the Master Watercolor set, which is a whole big selection of washes. Okay, so that's my color dodge layer. What I ended up, this is my actual layer from the painting. So this is my color dodge layer. And you can see in there, there's some pinks and some oranges and some blues. But what I ended up really liking was, let me show you with a pencil. I really like this area because that sort of hot pinkish orange color. I thought, ooh, that's really cool for a fox, right? It's just this really intense sort of just hot orange, really warm color. But then it also, at some point in time, I got this sort of cool shift in the shadow here, right? It's sort of purple. It's like cool right next to hot. So it's cool colors. So what I did was I created a new layer and I added some, you can see in the little thumbnail for the layer, it's just some washes that are, I selected that pink color and I just added the washes over the head. So I extended that pink or that hot sort of pink orange over the head. You see what's happening there. So on a new layer, I set this one to overlay. Overlay is my favorite color blend or layer blend mode.
I think overlay is everybody's favorite.
I think it is.
It's just
mode.
It's like it's a fallback.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm just going to throw a couple of cool wash. I wanted to make that area a little bit more cool, that shadow area underneath the fox's head. And I also wanted to make the eyes stand out a little bit more. So you can see right now the eye is a little. It could have more of a punch to it. So let's try this. Let's use the detailer. Let's see. So I've selected just white, right? And I'm just going to punch the eye up a little bit, and add maybe some highlights on the nose. And you could probably add like a rim light to make it stand out more from the background. Maybe blur that out a little bit. So see how things are starting to glow a little bit, like we're starting to get this sort of glowing effect. So that was the layer I just showed you. And this is the actual layer that I did.
Is it because it's like more a backlit environment, if that makes sense? Like digital painting is more backlit rather than reflective.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it's like RGB is color and with light versus CMYK, which is colored with pigment. So like if you're painting on paper, it's more of a CMYK pigment than it is colored light. So yeah, with digital, we're getting this colored light. So things can glow a lot more easier. Yeah. Okay, so here's where we are. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with where we are. So I wanted to do a color adjustment. So what I usually do, and you've probably seen me do this before, is copy all, 3-finger swipe, and paste. And so what this gives you is a flat, a layer with everything underneath flattened. Okay, and a color balance is color. That's what I was trying to think of. It's color balance adjustment. So I wanted to kind of push, maybe just this is another way to experiment, right? I mean, I wanted to push the midtones maybe a little bit more towards red. Yeah, so we're kind of seeing the fox, the orange fur and the fox sort of come to life by pushing the midtones toward red and maybe a little bit towards yellow, and then taking the shadows and maybe pushing them a little bit towards purple or blue. So just making an adjustment like that, and you can see, I mean, you can just experiment, you can just see what all, just pushing these colors around, you can just, you can create a purple fox if you want, right? So here's my actual color adjustment that I made for the painting. Okay, so next up, I wanted to bring back some of the white areas, right? So this is just a normal layer. And you want to brush, really any small brush, any detail brush would probably work just fine. But what we'll do is we'll go back to that paper round. Or let's try this perfect brush and see.
And we've had the same question pop in that we often have, which is, which is better, the Ultimate Tool Brush or the Master? And I know this is one you've answered a lot.
So yeah, so really the way to answer that is the Ultimate Brush Toolbox is everything, right? It's watercolor, it's oil, it's acrylic, it's charcoal, it's a little bit of everything. It's all encompassing, right? But the Master Watercolor brush set is like a deep dive into watercolor. Like if watercolor is your thing, then the Master Watercolor set includes like just an abundance of watercolor brushes. Now, they are different brushes, so it doesn't hurt to have both because it's just adding watercolor to your selection, right? So they are a different set of brushes. The main difference is the Master Watercolor just being all encompassing. It's just a massive selection of watercolor brushes.
Cool. There's loads of spatters and stuff as well in it, isn't there?
Oh
loads
yeah, and washes. For
washes,
sure, and just salt and all kinds of cool stuff. Okay, so I wanted to bring back some of the white fur and the highlights on the fox, and to do that, I'm just going over. Let's see, I'm going to take the opacity down a little bit, and I'm just going over these areas. Ooh, let's get a softer edge. Let's try this smooth round. Yeah, there we go. So that the edge is just softer on this brush. And just bringing back some of the highlights, some of the value contrast in the fox's fur. And what's really cool about this and is that these brushes, like it's really seamless because the brushes themselves are sourced from actual watercolor. Like you can paint on top of this or underneath the painting, and it just blends so seamlessly. Like there's no, like if you throw a wash on top, it just blends so perfectly that you really can't tell the digital from the traditional and vice versa. Okay, so this is my final white area that I did here. So I'm just adding that bit of white, and you can see that I brought it down some as if the paint was kind of like running off the fox's chest. I try to look for areas like that. Like let's take a look real quick. When I'm painting over a traditional, I try to look for areas like this where the paint, like if it was really, really wet, this paint would have kind of ran down this way. And there's already some paint kind of doing that. So I'm just trying to just accent that a little bit. You know, these areas, I'm looking for areas where paint just kind of runs, or it might spread out a little bit. Stuff like that. Like in the ear up here, there's a completely lost edge. Lots of lost edges out here. I'm just looking for areas like that that I can sort of accentuate, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I wanted to, I really like this sort of glowing effect like we mentioned before. So I knew I wanted to take another layer and sort of add this this sort of golden sort of glow. So I took a sort of a yellow orange color, and I wanted to use a wash. Let's try this one. And I set it to overlay. And I just began to like add these really nice, oh, let's make it a little bit more orange. Warm it up a little bit. And just sort of, you can see what's happening. It's just adding this sort of glowing effect around the edge. That's too much. Take the opacity down. Something like that. I'm just tapping these washes around the edge, just looking for this sort of glowing effect. And you can see the final here. My yellow was a little less intense on the final, so it's a little bit more subtle. Okay, so I needed the whiskers to stand out a little bit too, right? Because the whiskers are getting a little bit lost, especially when you're viewing it from a distance. So I just took a detail brush, and I used the detail liner from the Ultimate set, and just added those whiskers back. Okay, so you can see lost, and then a little bit of highlight just brings them back. As a final step, I flattened everything again. I sharpened it. So if you can see, this is really subtle. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but just adding a little bit of a sharpen will bring out some of that texture and some of that detail.
Yeah, shows up well.
And so a lot of traditional watercolor paintings have this sort of taped edge where you had the paper taped down to a illustration board or something that you're painting on. And when you peel that tape off, it gives it this real clean border, right? And I wanted to add that here because I felt like it needed a frame, like it needed something to rein in all of those splatters and washes, and it just gives it this nice finished frame. Now I'm pretty happy with this. Like I would, this painting was in the trash, and now I think I could maybe do some prints or something with this, and I would be pretty happy with it. I think this is really cool and got a lot of random effects, and the colors are crazy, which I love. I think there's a good value contrast happening, and I think it would make a really cool print.
Okay, so Sam says, when you draw in analog, do you do the background first and then keep adding colors on top? I ask since in digital I tend to make the background last.
Okay, yeah, a lot of times when I go with a traditional or an analog painting, I'm sort of toning the whole thing at once, if that makes sense. Like, man, how do I explain that? Okay, so like if this watercolor, like I may have thrown down, like if my primary sort of color was going to be like this orangish red for the fox's fur, I might just throw down like a lot of water and then like a lot of that color, which would have spread around and sort of toned the whole thing. Now you can kind of control it some so that it doesn't go, I may not want the background to be like the exact same color as the fox or as intense of that same color intensity. But like, well, I'll show you an example. Let's look at this one. And I'll show you another example here in just a bit. Let's see, let's do I need a pencil. There we go. So like with this, this color that you see right here, that sort of like cool sort of gray color, I probably actually had that color going throughout like this, because I'm just kind of toning the whole thing. So the background and the foreground become, they're in the beginning, they're kind of seamless. So then this stuff right here, this white right here, was probably like white gouache, and it was put with the intention of separating the background from the foreground.
Cool.
Does that make sense? So the
Yeah,
background
I
and the
think so.
foreground sort of, that they sort of happen at once, and then I'm looking for ways to separate them so that it appears seamless. Because if I were to add the background after the fact, it's sort of, they begin to look like two separate things. And in watercolor, I really want them to look blended and part of the same painting. I want them to look cohesive.
Cool. Okay.
Right?
Cool. So Bill asks, going from analog to digital watercolor, do you ever have trouble or advice with matching a paper texture?
Yeah, so yes, especially if you're going to print it, because here's the thing, like with this one, we used this texture that you see was from the photograph. Like I didn't add paper texture at any point in time. Now, if I'd started digital with the intention of finishing digital, at some point in time, I would have had to have used like the Canvas Creator or a paper texture to add in that texture. Now, if you want to add paper texture, we would have, at some point, we would have had to have gone in with, a white brush and covered all of this up. I would have had to have gone in and covered up all of that paper texture in order to add another one. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem with this one is I wanted all of that splatter. I wanted all this stuff on the outside of the fox. So I just kept the paper texture. Now, some brushes include paper texture in the stroke. And I probably, if it stood out too much, I probably would just avoid those certain brushes when my paper texture is already present from the photograph. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah, I think so. And for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure a lot of people do know, but Nathan made a product specifically for canvas, for texture, which you can use to add more depth and realism to your digital photos, which is well worth looking at in his store.
Yeah, the ultimate canvas creator.
Yeah, it's cool. Love that product. Okay, so Johannes asks, what's your favorite approach if you scan your artwork, DPI levels, etc.? Well, I think we've already established you just whack it on the floor outside and take a photo.
Right. I take it outside in the shade. It's important to be in the shade. And I just take a photo with my iPhone most of the time. And I have a DSLR camera, but it involves a little bit more of a setup. But if I was going to do a larger print, I would use the DSLR. I typically don't scan things because I paint like this picture, this painting of this sheep is not very big, but it's probably too big for me to scan. I would have to scan it in pieces and then assemble it in Photoshop. And man, that's just a level of complexity that I'm just for fun, I'm not willing to go that level of complexity. I find it just as easy to just walk outside and then throw it down on the ground, and
that might be a barrier to just actually getting it done in the first place.
It would. I would think, oh gosh, if I have to scan this in 3 different scans, and then I have to splice it together in photo. Even though Photoshop will do it, it will automate that process, but still, it's just a level of complexity that I usually don't go into. Now, if you have a really large flatbed scanner, then yeah, by all means. But I do okay with the iPhone shots, especially if I'm not looking to make a huge print or something. If you're going to poster print or something like that, you're going to want to use a DSLR with super high resolution.
Cool.
All right, so this is another one. Now this was a painting of a sheep, and I did this in black and white because it was just a value contrast study. It was just practice with traditional paints to get the blackest blacks and the whitest whites, and just a value contrast study just for my own benefit.
The sheep's getting a lot of love as well in the comments. People like the
sheep.
A
lot of love for the sheep. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, like a sheep.
That's awesome. I thought maybe we would go through this one together and just kind of see what kind of fun we can come up with. Cool. Now, I thought beforehand, I was looking at it and I thought it would be fun. And I played with this a little bit yesterday. But it would be fun to do like the shadow side purple, because it's like a cool color, and then like this side where the light might be hitting would be yellow, where maybe the sun is hitting the sheep. And these two colors are opposite each other on the color wheel, so they're complementary. So I think it would look really cool. Let's back out of that. All right, so the first thing I would do would be to just duplicate this one. And I'm going to turn the original photo off, and I'm going to set this one, because it's black and white, I'm going to set it to multiply. That way we can paint on top of it and we can paint underneath it, and both will show. Okay. So I want to go ahead and just shift it to purple. So I'm going to use that color balance adjustment. And let's take the midtones to purple and maybe a little blue to get there. And we'll shift the shadows to blue. I actually think that's a little too conscious, a little too punchy with the color. So let me, there we go. We'll add yellow back to it because they're opposite on the color wheel. Like going yellow will, like, it will take the intensity down. I think that's pretty cool. All right. So now I think let's add a new layer and let's go with the overlay. And I think let's go orange, and I'm gonna drop in. Now with this one, again, there's not a lot of painting, like brush strokes that need to happen, I don't think, because we're just playing with the colors, really. We're not really adding a lot of detail. You know, we don't need to repaint the eyes or the nose or anything because it's already there. So I'm gonna go to the washes, and I'm just gonna see about maybe adding an orange wash to get our light side. Let's try this one. Okay, that's pretty good. And I'm just tapping. I'm using the same wash because you can't, you know, when you're painting over something like this, you can't tell. I mean, it's the same wash being used over and over, but you can't really tell. We're just looking for like the color shift and the intensity. So I like that. Let's add a layer underneath. And let's see if we can get, since we're painting underneath, let's see if we can get some yellow in there. And let's go with like, well, let's just drop another wash in first and see what that does. Okay, I think it's maybe too big. That's too intense. Let's go lighter yellow. I think that looks pretty good. Let's try throwing in maybe a light blue in on the shadow side. I'm just going to use the same wash. Oh, that's good. Maybe try a different wash. Okay, I think that's pretty cool. All right, so let's do. Okay, so I think what's happening now is like there's a little bit of a loss of the real super bright highlights that we had before. Like there wasn't a lot of them, but there was just enough. And now because we've added those color washes underneath, like it's pretty much gone. So I want to add white. So I'm going to do a layer above everything else. I'm going to go ahead and set it to overlay as well. And then let's get a brush from the Ultimate set with a soft edge. All of these brushes at the top, especially the detail liner, and then these first like 5 or 6 brushes are really kind of intended for smaller detail. And I'm going to get this paper round because it looks like it has a soft edge. And I'm going to do about half opacity. And I'm on an overlay layer. And I'm just going to paint back in some of that white highlight. So I don't know if you can see it right now, but I'm on the nose. And add a little bit here to the eye and the top of the head. This is really subtle. Like, I don't know if you can tell what's happening. I'm adding some to the ear, so you should see the ear
Yeah,
brighten up a
no,
little bit.
I can definitely see it here, and hopefully everyone else can see it too on their connections, but it's really clear here.
Okay, cool. So now I'm like underneath the nose, and I'm just like adding some highlight back to the sheep's wool, right? And I'm just kind of tapping the brush. Now I'm going back around underneath the nose and just adding a little bit of highlight to the cool purple side because we've just lost so much of it. Maybe there's some bounce light happening in the scene, so we're just add a little bit of that back. Yeah, I think I'm going to erase a little bit of what I added to the purple side. I think I want that to be a little bit darker. Yeah, so like we spent like maybe 5 minutes on this, and I'm already like, I think I like this pretty well. You know, I think if you've watched any of my sessions in the past, you know that I really love splatters. So let's see if we can just finish it out real quick with some splatters from the ultimate, or the master watercolor set. So there's a splatters section in that set, and let's just see if we can get a couple of really good splatters. Let's try this one, splatter 4. And I'm gonna start with white, and I'm just gonna add on a new layer. It's set to normal, it's above everything else. Just to add a couple of splatters going on. That may be a little too much. Let's try another one. That's way too much. Let's go something that's maybe tiny splatters here. Yeah, that's a little bit, that's less intense, right? I'm going to erase a couple of those. And I'm going to add some on the dark side. I'm going to use the really dark purple though. And let's just, these last few, these paint drips, they'll just throw like random dots. So let's see about doing that. Add a couple of white ones. Yeah, okay, so I think I'd call that one done. Like, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that. I think it added that like warm light and cool light, which we were looking for, and added some cool splatters, and the contrast is still there. We added back the highlights, and I think this one works. Like, I mean, we spent like less than 10 minutes, right? We probably spent 5 minutes, and I think this would be a cool print. You know,
That's awesome.
I think that would
It's
work.
added loads of depth, hasn't it? Loads of depth.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, like I feel like I know this sheep.
Nita says the perfect ears make it look so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it really works. I love the contrast of purple and yellow orange. That's a favorite color combo of mine. So I think that really works really well.
I think this is probably a good point. There's a few people asking. There's Debbie asking in the questions, and I've just saw it fly up from someone else and saying, "Is the watercolor course out yet?" Because obviously at the Create More Live, we talked about the watercolor course. Since then, it's had even more testing and people playing with it and fine tuning and polishing and love and care and attention. And the good news is it's coming out in January.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Which is super cool. So for anyone who loves Nathan's teaching as much as we do at Design Cuts, who wants to learn everything about watercolor, how he does it, the entire process inside out, it is an absolute masterclass. Come along in January and you will be able to get that course and dive in.
And what I think is really cool and unique about the course is I'm always relating traditional to digital. Now, you certainly don't have to be a traditional painter to enjoy the course, but what I do is I'm focusing on digital, but I'm relating it to what is its traditional counterpart, so that when you're creating digital watercolor, you're familiar with the characteristics of the traditional, so that you know what to look for, and you know all the things to go through in your head while you're painting to make it as realistic as possible, so that you can begin and finish a digital watercolor from beginning to end, and you can do it with confidence. And I think that's the biggest thing with painting like this, is just confidence in like knowing what you're looking for, and not having to really stumble or question yourself, because you have the knowledge that you need of like the fundamentals and all the things that you need to look for. And I think that's a big deal, and that's something that it took me years and years to realize in my own work. So yeah, very excited, very excited.
Yeah,
I can't wait
and
for
it is a
people to dive
wonderful
in.
bridge between the digital and the analog, and there's so many transferable skills and things that you will learn whilst doing the course as well, in
Right.
terms of compositional theory, in terms of even mindset, and mindset
Yeah,
to
right.
take within to going
That's
into.
such a big deal. It really
Yeah,
is
for
such a big
sure.
deal. Is the way you're thinking about your own work is a game changer, in my opinion, because I used to have a different view of my own work, and it was really crippling. You have to reach a point where your confidence is such a huge thing. You're confident in your brush selection, you're confident in what you're going after and what you're looking for, and it's a total, your mindset is a total game changer when you can get the right frame of mind when you're painting.
Cool. So for anyone who isn't signed up to these sessions, up at the top, there's a little DC logo. If you click on that, you'll be able to sign up to the sessions. So there will be another session based on that product, so it can be shown off in January at launch. But if you're obviously part of the DC community, we will reach out to you and tell you when it comes out, and we will make a big fanfare because we're super, super excited. And it's Mr. Harrison Ford.
Yes. So I've got one more thing I want to show you guys real quick, because I mentioned at the beginning, using digital to aid in a traditional painting, right? And not maybe not everyone does traditional painting, but it is cool to see how you can use Procreate as a tool in traditional painting as well. So I had this example. I thought it was a perfect example. My kids are always pushing me to do more of what we call nerd art. And my kids and I are really super into, like, we're book nerds and we're movie nerds. They love everything from my childhood that I've shared with them, and one of them being Indiana Jones. They're always pushing me to do more. Do a Star Wars.
Why does it always
Doctor
have to be
Who.
snakes, right?
Right, exactly. You can tell the look on his face, right?
Always has to be snakes.
So this was some nerd. I mean, I think the proper term is probably fan art, but we use the term nerd in my house affectionately. So we refer to everything as nerd this and nerd that. And this was a piece of nerd art that I was doing. This is a watercolor portrait. This is obviously Indiana Jones. And this is just taking it out onto the patio and shooting a picture of it with my iPhone. And what happened was everything's very tight in this painting, and like I knew I wanted to do some kind of a background, but I didn't want to just start throwing washes down because everything was so kind of like really tight in this painting. Like I didn't want to just start like messing around without really knowing what I was doing or what I was looking for. So I snapped the photo, I brought it into Procreate, and I knew that I kind of wanted to do some type of background, but I wanted it to kind of have this framed, like it's still a confined. It's not just washes going everywhere. So I created a selection. Well, first of all, I removed all the paper texture, so we just have this plain white. I removed the background, so everything's just white. And I created a rectangle selection, and I just filled it with yellow wash, those wash stamps from the master watercolor set, within that rectangle selection. And I thought, okay, this is great. This frames it real nicely. I like how, if you take a look, let me get that pencil again. Composition wise, I just like how his shoulders are coming out from the frame, and then the top of his hat is coming out from the frame. It just kind of extends the border of the frame a little bit. I also like how, once I had this in place, I ended up going with yellow, but before that, let me get back on the right layer. You can just go through and you can do this color adjustment, this hue saturation. I'm just changing the hue, and you can test out different colors to see, to give yourself a roadmap on the actual painting to see what works. Because again, like, it's transparent. So if I had tried this pink color first, which in my opinion does not work, but I would have had trouble like changing it to yellow, right? I wouldn't, I would have had trouble with that because it's transparent. So I ended up going with the yellow, and then to finish it out, I threw some white washes in. which I ended up doing with gouache on the actual painting. And I knew I could use the gouache to get that white, so I went ahead and experimented with some white washes. Now, what ended up happening, which I didn't really plan for, but it sort of created this area right here, which looks like sunlight kind of coming around his ear, which I thought, oh, that's a really nice touch. It just kind of letting that wash, bleed around the edge of the portrait a little bit, kind of gave the illusion of like intense light from behind or to the side. And I thought that was really cool. So I ended up using this as my roadmap. And let me see if I can exit out of here for you guys. And here, this is the finish. So you can see it's almost the same thing, right? It's almost exactly the same thing. And so I went in with confidence because I knew exactly what I was doing and exactly what I was looking for. And that was only through the help of snapping that picture and working it out in Procreate, and then going to finish it with just, and I know going in with the feeling of, I know exactly what I'm doing, exactly what I'm looking for. It just completely changes. It becomes fun instead of, I'm unsure. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm just trying, you know what I'm saying? It completely changes your
really cool.
Your game.
I mean, one of the questions was like, why? Someone said, look, why would you take a perfectly good analog picture and take it into digital? Well, I think that answers it really nicely. Yeah.
But, and you still have the analog, right? Like you still have, like it's not going anywhere. You take it into Procreate, and you have fun and you experiment.
Another dimension.
You can take some of that experimentation back with you the next time you do a traditional painting. It's like, hey, maybe I want to try that intense pink color instead of orange, or I want to try those blues that I saw, the last time I experimented in Procreate or Photoshop.
Cool.
Yay!
That's awesome. Yay, there we go. Thanks ever so much, Nathan. Thank you so much. Everyone in comments, please do give Nathan some love, because he does give our community so much value for free, which is just amazing. We've got loads of cool products in store, haven't we, next year? Loads of cool ideas, loads more stuff coming up, and the watercolor course is just kind of the tip of the iceberg.
So excited.
It's really cool. So I hope everyone just enjoys this stuff, geeks out over it as much as we do, because it's just a fun ride.
I'm a paint nerd, man. I'm an art nerd. See?
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, I think I am. I think everyone here is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I am an absolute art nerd. Like I just geek out over textures and colors. And so it's always fun to create these brush sets and really see what you can push and see what you can do and what you can create with them. And, just all these, it's just these products that we make together. It's just so much fun. Right?
And we're nerds as well. I mean, I just took a screen grab when you put the Indiana Jones thing up against the yellow. I took a screen grab of that and sent it in our work chat thing to Adrienne, the designer I work with, who's just sent back, very cool, smiley face, exclamation mark, exclamation mark.
Nice.
We're nerds
very
too.
Cool.
We love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
cool.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Remember, logo at the top if you want to subscribe to come to these sessions. They're always free. They're in our learning hub. There's lots of great value there. And do come along for our next session, and it'll be great to see you there. And Nathan, thank you so much. We will see you again here soon in January, obviously.
Absolutely.
To have a look at that watercolor course, which I know is
cool.
Yeah,
it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.